Better like that? Okay. And so the idea is we're happy to take any kind of questions. There's no questions that make us uncomfortable. The idea is to have a live and transparent and open debate with anyone who has questions. The funny thing was this email that I received from the hotel a couple of days ago, indicating that they were very happy to host the event, etc., but that they had a concern about cameras and about journalists who would probably be broadcasting pictures of the hotel because this was a political event. So I answered that this was absolutely not a political event. There's nothing political about what we're doing here. We're happy to be challenged on this and we'll answer any questions, but there's nothing political about what we're doing. Evghenia Gutul's case takes place in a political context, and we will obviously discuss that, and Gonzalo will dig into this in detail in a few minutes. But what we do is we're defense lawyers here. Myself has been a criminal lawyer for at least 10 years when I started to be a lawyer, and what we're doing is defending someone who has been investigated, prosecuted, and now been sentenced to a 7-year prison term. A lady who is the mother of 2 young children, who now is remanded in custody in a very, very strict and difficult prison. We can get into that. The so-called prison has been considered by the European Court of Human Rights and by various other groups as being somewhere so difficult that Article 3 of European Court of Human Rights is violated there on a daily basis. So this is a very serious situation with someone who is at present suffering hugely from the consequences of this prosecution. So this is our standpoint, and we are helping the Moldovan team on the ground with the appeal that has been filed against this 7 years decision, and we also are going to file in various applications before international courts or mechanisms, would it be European Court of Human Rights or United Nations. So that's a general, I would say, standpoint for what we're doing and why we are doing it. And as I said, we're not doing this for political reasons. We are not supporting one or other or another political party, whichever is involved or is not involved. Our only goal here is to support the defense of our client. So this being said, I think maybe the best is to start presenting to you all what this sentence is and what roughly is in these 349 pages, because the first instant court decision is very consistent and is more than 300 pages. Procedurally, what you need to know is in Moldova, maybe some of you know a bit about Moldovan criminal procedural rules, but for the ones who don't, and I was amongst the ones who didn't until recently. We worked a lot with our Moldavan colleagues, and we had lengthy discussions with criminal specialized colleagues, constitutional specialized colleagues in Moldova to understand how things work. The system in Moldova is actually quite close to the French one, meaning that there's a first phase, which is a pre-trial phase. This is what is called the investigation phase, and investigation in Moldova remains secret, meaning that you as a targeted person or your lawyers do not have access to the investigation, to the criminal bundle. The investigation is handled by a prosecutor, and in the case of Evghenia Gutul, the investigation was opened on the 21st of January 2022, which is roughly 3.5 years ago. The investigation concerned the Shaw Party and the campaign for the local election in Balti. One of the persons concerned by the investigation was Marina Tober. And the main charge was violation of the procedure for managing political party elections and fund resources. Then in April 2022 was added a money laundering charge. In July 2022, there was an extension of the scope of the investigation to new facts. These facts were violating and managing shore funds in the first half of year 2022. And this will be very important for what I will be explaining in a moment, for knowingly accepting financing from an organized criminal group. And this, as I said, for the trial itself is going to be very important. In July 2022, there was a search of the house of our client, Evghenia Gutul. In September, there was a second raid in her house with a search. And in November 2022, Evghenia Gutul was formally charged as an accomplice for these offenses that I mentioned, and more specifically for aiding the knowing acceptance of financing by a political party from an organized criminal group or from a criminal organization. That is in November 2022, but when she is formally charged, she does not gain access to the case. In May 2023, she is elected as governor of Gagauzie. In February 2024, and this is technically very important, you will understand why in a minute, the case of Evghenia Gutul is disjoined, meaning separated from this other first investigation that was started in January 2022. And this is important because a whole chunk of the criminal investigation is going to be kept separate from what is going to be sent to court for trial. So you have two bundles, one which is now in a drawer, and another one which is now sent to court for the purpose of trying Evghenia Gutul and one other defendant. This is what is decided by the prosecutor, who considers that he has finished his investigation. The problem occurs then that obviously when Evghenia Gutul is notified that she is going to be sent to trial, her lawyers then request access to the case. And the timeline then is that it is given 15 days to the lawyers to study the case, which is more than 16,000 pages. And I can tell you that we've been working between 8 and 14 hours a day on this case for a couple of weeks. And if I have enough to present to you our conclusions, my conclusions, in a way that I consider solid enough to be having this press conference, I can tell you that I have not at all been able to review all aspects of this case. That will take months. And I've got a team. I have got a copy of the case at my office. 2 weeks to review 16,000 pages of an investigation, which is not the whole bundle, because half of it, or I don't know how much of it, has not been given to me. With no copy, because the lawyers are invited to come and read the case somewhere, I think in court, with a refusal to hand over a copy on a key on a computer of the case, which is obviously absolutely impossible in terms of being able to advise the client on what is in, inform the client on what is in the case, and number two, to exercise the rights which are provided for by the criminal Moldavan procedural code, which are, as I said, similar to what would happen in France, which is that once you've been given access, you can ask for something. The purpose of pre-trial phase is to prepare a trial with the possibility for the prosecutor, but also for the defense, to participate in a debate that is supposed to be adversarial in a way that enables a judge who is supposed to be independent to make his religion, may I say, about what is true or is not, and what is the truth and what is not. So within this 2 weeks, with no copy of the case time frame, it is obvious that it is not possible to exercise the right of asking the prosecutor to do something, to interview witnesses. There's also a possibility under procedural Moldovan code to challenge the legality of some of the investigations carried out. Illegality of the search, illegality of phone tappings, illegality of witness statements. Some witnesses were themselves, as we hear, pressured to make statements, etc. No possibility to challenge the legality of some of the so-called evidence produced by the prosecution. Also, a challenge about this artificial separation of the two investigations, and a request to be able to have more time and also to access this other investigation bundle. Answer is very clear. All these requests are denied. The case goes to trial, and the trial is opened on the 23rd of April 2024, which is 15 days after the termination of the investigation, which was decided upon on the 8th of April. This is pre-trial. Then you have this. This is the trial. And the interesting part about having the copy of the decision, and this is for you if you want at any point after the conference, if you want to check what I'm saying, I'm happy to provide you with a few minutes to check how this decision is structured. But when you look at the sections of the judgment, you understand very clearly what happened and how it happened. This trial was led by a unique judge, who is Anna, sorry for my pronunciation, Ceaușescu, who was sitting alone without other colleagues to ask questions and participate in what will be the decision-making process. The arguments of the prosecutor are presented in the judgment from page 22 to 72. That means that you have 50 pages in the court decision, which are a sum up of the prosecutor's arguments. The first pages are just a recap of what the client is being tried for, and a recap of the client's line of defense, which is a presentation of what Evghenia Gutul claims as being her absence of responsibility in what she is accused of, and in a nutshell, which is to say that she has never participated in any illegal financing process, that if sums were received that she didn't know about it, and explaining at the time what she was doing, who she was, and that she denied any wrongdoing. Then you have the presentation of the witnesses called by the prosecutor. And this goes on for 106 pages, 18 witnesses. So that means that the prosecutor time is from page 22 to page 178, which is 165 or 6 pages of the judgment. The arguments of the defense, because a time came for the defense. I will then explain what kind of time, but it was given at least the impression that the defense was going to be able to say something. And this is, you have to jump to page 178. And page 178, 3.3 paragraph, the defense's argument. And it goes up to here, which is 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. And I can read them. The court further notes that according to blah, 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 that's a criminal code, the parties participating in the trial of the case have equal rights. Oh, that's good news. Being vested by the criminal procedural law with equal opportunities to support their positions. Another good news. The parties in the criminal procedure law with equal opportunities, etc., choose their position, the manner and means of supporting it independently, being independent of the court, other bodies or persons. The court grants assistance to any party at its request, it won't, but under the terms of this code, for the administration of the necessary evidence. In the context, it is noted that the court discussed the following requests submitted by the defense. 1, request for hearing witnesses. 2, request for presenting of documents, materials. 3, request for appointment of an economic financial expert. 4, request for appointing of the economic expert by another lawyer. Decision by the resolution of the court. The request for the presentation of documents, materials, as well as the presentation of documents, material, etc., etc., as well as the request for the appointment of the expert, was rejected as unfounded. Subsequently, the court certifies that the resolution, the list of witnesses presented, was partially admitted. So everything is thrown out, except the interview of partially admitted list of witnesses. More than 200 witnesses were requested by the defense to be interviewed, and the court agreed to interview 20 out of 200, not knowing why some were rejected, some were accepted. And in terms of reasoning as to why were rejected all the other requests, there's not one word. This is rejected as unfounded. End of story. So we then have the defense witnesses moment, which is from page 178 to 194. That is for 20 witnesses, 16 pages as to what I presented. For 18 witnesses from the prosecutor, meaning less, it goes on 10 times more because you have 106 pages. So I was not in court, but it seems that the time granted to witnesses on the defense side was 10 times quicker than for the prosecutor. So we had very detailed explanations from the prosecution witnesses, but the defense witnesses were very short. And that is it, because you also have the examination of evidence, but that is within what the prosecutor presents, and that is the list of the evidence within the investigation bundle, which I spoke about, which is just part of the bundle, with an official formal request made by the defense to be able to examine also the other investigation that was set aside in a drawer. On this also, the court refused. No, this is not our case. You're not having a look at it. And with also, as I explained, an impossibility for the defense to ask the court to examine other pieces of evidence that the defense would have brought during the pre-trial phase if it had had the opportunity to do it. But that was closed. So the only case which is handed over to the court and to the defense during the trial is the prosecutor's case. And for what the defense says in court, oh, I need a financial expert. I want other witnesses. I also challenge the regularity of the search of the house, of the tapping of the phones. This is also something, and that's at the end of the decision. I will read it for you. All the motions for irregularity of the investigation, of some of the evidence, all was rejected, also with no reasoning, unfounded. So the defense could not present any additional evidence because it could not do it pre-trial. What was requested during trial was rejected, and I read there's no reasoning for why, and could not challenge the procedural lawfulness of the evidence presented. So then you get the court's assessment, which is the court explains why it considers that the evidence provided by the prosecution is valid, and why it considers that the tiny portion of evidence that the court accepted to pretend to review, which is these couple of witnesses interviewed, is not valid. Why the court considers that the defense has not been successful in proving innocence. That goes on from page 194 to 315. So that goes on for 150 pages. And that is it. The conclusion is guilty, and guilty of what? And that will be my last remarks before Gonzalo, I think, will have the right moment to start telling you more about the political context and explaining why what I presented happened, because that is the other one important thing is, are there violations of due process? Is this process, investigation, and trial in violation of fundamental rules of rule of law? And the answer is clearly yes. And then there's the question of, okay, if it is like that, why? And is it important to ask this question? Does it make a difference? And obviously it does. So Evghenia Gutul is sentenced, and you know it, 7 years is a harsh sentence. And she is sentenced in regards of having accepted or accepting financing from an organized criminal group. There are other criminal offenses in the Moldovan criminal code, as there are here also quite similar provisions in the French criminal code about financing of electoral campaigns, etc., from whom you can receive money, what are the rules around donations, etc. But in this specific case, these are not the offenses that were retained. The only offense that was retained, which is a choice from the court and the prosecutor, was not to go for what maybe would have been a safer choice, which is the more technical, saying, okay, I mean, money was brought in from abroad. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. I don't know. If it is, maybe something can be looked into. But that was not the choice. The choice was to underline, stamp, point at the connection between our client and an organized group, criminal group. Which organized criminal group? When you read this, you don't know. So we've got this kind of ghost, cloudy, and for that reason difficult to attack, because you don't know what the court is talking about. You do think that this has got to do with Ilan Shor, and you understand it, especially because the lady who has been leading this trial was one of the judges making the decision in a 2024 other case, which is the decision which ended up deciding that anything which had to do with Shor Party, which, as many of you must know, was dissolved in 2023, I think. There is, I understand, an application pending before the European Court of Human Rights about this dissolution of the Shor Party. I understand there was also a constitutional application which was not successful. But this is what the court will retain against our client in the course of her trial, which is, you are connected with an organized crime. And you need this to sentence her on the face of this provision, because it's part of what constitutes the offense. And the problem is that this decision had already been made in another case, and it had been made by this judge amongst two other judges. So two questions on this specific point. Why do we have 3 judges in the previous case and only 1 in Evghenia Gutul's case, knowing that there has been challenges asking this judge to be set aside from the trial because it was considered that she was not showing independence, that there were reasons to believe that she was not independent, also because in the process of deciding which judge or judges would be sitting, violation seems to have taken place, knowing that it is supposed, my understanding under Moldovan criminal procedural rules is that the appointment of judges to sit in a trial is random, and it seems that decisions were made and it was not random and the judge was picked. And we understand why, because she was sitting in the other case and she can't be independent in reviewing the question of this specific organized criminal group question, because she already made a decision on that. So half of the discussion was already decided upon. And under the criminal procedural code, I understand that the provision about collegiality or single judge is that the court must, the word is may, but in our case it is must, decide for collegiality if the case is specifically complex. I imagine that 16,000 pages is complex. Otherwise, what cases will be complex in Moldova? And if the case is of sensitive nature with a high level importance for public order. If this case is not sensitive and of high importance for public order, and Gonzalo will bring this in a minute, which case will be? So it is just obvious for me that this case should have been handled by a college of judges, not only one, and especially not one who had made a decision already in a similar case. And once this is said, I think that we have a very clear view on what raises serious doubts, at least. I'm above serious doubts, but I leave it to everyone to make his own mind, that there's a clear technical problem in the sequence, in the rushing, in the closing doors to any adversarial process during the trial, in the rush to get this decision made. And this is in the press, it's open source. There has been declarations from the justice minister, from the president, I think herself, before the decision was made, saying, oh, don't be worried. Sentences are coming soon, announcing the decision of the court, saying that sentences were going to be rendered. Where do you see that? I mean, courts make decisions. Political figures don't announce that someone is going to be sentenced a couple of weeks ago and saying, oh, don't worry, it's going to happen quickly, meaning before the election's ongoing. So to conclude, I must say I'm not amused, because it's not amusing that people are now kind of telling me, oh, you're holding a political event here because of the elections. My client was sentenced in a rush with no respect of what obviously are the fundamental rules of law of a country which is member of the European Council and will respond if needed, and I fear it will be needed for these violations before the European Court of Human Rights. But also I understand that the central government is willing to carry on with the process of requesting to join the European Union. Rule of law is part of the package, and I'm very happy to discuss with anyone in Moldova or outside of Moldova the violations that I think are obvious and that I presented now. and we hope that we will, by exposing these violations, bring a bit of hope that our client will receive a better treatment during the appeal process, indicating, but I think that everybody knows that if this is not the case, obviously we will bring this case to another international level.
Thank you, William. I will be, good morning, by the way. Oh, sorry, my microphone. Yeah, I already did it. I already put the microphone. First of all, good morning to everybody. Thank you for being here. I think I will be very brief in what I will express, because what is important here at the end is the question and answer. I'm pretty sure you have a lot of doubts and a lot of questions to be presented, and I think William make an excellent presentation of the case. And I will take it from where he said something that for me it's very important, and this will be open to discussions later on with you. William said, any questions? No questions are uncomfortable, so you can make any questions. But in this case, most answers are extremely uncomfortable. Why? Because this case is a clear lawfare case where the politics has been criminalized and judicialized. For me, in my experience, it's quite clear that criminalizing democratically elected leaders means stripping the vote of thousands of citizens of its value. And this is exactly what they have done with Evghenia. Attacking her is attacking the entire Gagauzie people and denying their right to be represented. Because we should not forget something that's very important. The autonomy of Gagauzie is guaranteed by the Moldovan constitution. Persecuting its government is a violation of their very constitution. They are acting against their own constitution by attacking her, imprisoning her, and convicting her. William was explaining the procedure, but it's very important to have something in mind. Out of his work, there is one idea, that the judicial deadlines coincide with the political calendar, which means impartiality has vanished. And that's very clear. And you know something more, the pattern is always the same, using courts, medias, and state resources as weapons against minorities. This is also something that we should keep in mind. Why? Because if being elected becomes a personal risk of prosecution, then voting itself loses all meaning. The persecution of Evghenia destroyed the entire community, trust in democracy's institution. We are not defending just her. We are defending the right of the people who vote her and the people who she represents. And this is important to have it in mind, because people seem to be very nervous about if this is a political defense. No, don't be confused. We are defending political rights, which is different as making a political defense. Who is making a political action is the judge and the prosecutor. We are just taking what they have done and put it into the frame of the rule of law. Why? Because we should not forget something. William explained very clearly. It's very important. Moldova is try to become member of the European Union. Well, the most important thing to be member of the European Union is to respect the values, the fundamental values of the Constitution of the Union, which is the rule of law. And this case is the paramount of the violation of those fundamental rights and those grounds of the European Union. At the end of the day, and let me say it very clearly, the case of Evghenia is a test for Europe credibility. Either it is defend its values or it is lose them. When they go to celebrate things in Moldova, they should have visited the jail and should have visited our client in order to see the conditions that she's suffering for one reason, for being the representative of a national minority. And this is something that also the European Court of Justice has considered in rulings from 2023, and we are pretty sure that this will be also taken into consideration by those bodies where we are going, the European Court of Human Rights and also the UN mechanism. And I think, to be honest, this is not the first time that this happens within Europe. All what we hope is that this is the last time that happens, because Europe cannot be playing these double standards, accepting what is going on with Evghenia and criticizing things that happens in other places. She has certain rights. All those rights, as described by William, has been violated, and we have the impression that we have a very strong case, but not only a strong case, we have a legitimate case, and more than that, the law is on our side, because who violate the law has been those who convict her. And I will suggest, if we are all in agreement, that we enter into question and answer, because I'm watching your faces and I'm pretty sure you have a lot of questions that we will try to answer, and this will bring more an interrelation among all of us. And I support William's talk of this morning. There is no uncomfortable questions, but believe me, there will be a lot of uncomfortable answers. Okay, so let's open the floor to questions and answers.
I guess I'd like to start. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time first and foremost. A couple of things I want to discuss.
Just sorry, because we didn't have an introduction. If maybe each of you can say who he is, that would be nice. Cool.
Name is
Sorry, the second interruption. I'm an old deaf lawyer, so if you can speak a bit louder, it will be a great favor for me.
Yasin from RT International, based out of Istanbul. General, thank you for taking the time. A couple of things I do want to discuss. First and foremost is, of course, the legal process. It has been essentially sentenced to 7 years in prison. And you mentioned at the end of your speech that you do plan on, hypothetically speaking, taking this to higher courts.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of courts are we talking? But more importantly, how long would this process take to yield a result, considering the sentence that she's already facing? What kind of a time frame are we looking at?
I think there are two main routes. One is challenges in Moldova, and there's a challenge against the conviction, but also about the fact that she is remanded in custody, which is still pre-trial custody, because under Moldovan law, she is still presumed to be innocent. She hasn't been finally sentenced. So there's a challenge about the irregularity of her being now in prison, knowing that she was not in prison before the court trial. She was under judicial supervision. She was in house arrest, and she was not violating her judicial supervision. So why suddenly is it not possible to consider that she would be attending her trial on appeal? There's absolutely no reasoning in the case, in the sentence, in the decision. It's only indicated that it is for the purpose of her serving her sentence. I don't think there's one word even about flight risk. There's no reasoning. It's just, okay, now you go to prison, and no consideration for her being mother of small children. There is a provision in the Moldovan Criminal Code providing for a necessity of a special reasoning, plus the fact that it's only for some very serious offenses committed against people, meaning violence, for example, that you can send a mother or father of small children to prison. Otherwise, there are requirements not to do it and to find alternative ways of sentencing, which is what you also have in France, for example. So there are several grounds to challenge the fact that she's in prison now, and these are being tried in Moldova unsuccessfully for the moment. And in parallel to that, we have the possibility to apply for interim measures or decisions by United Nations mechanisms, and we're working on these applications. So in due course, meaning in the weeks coming, it is possible that we, if we do not get favorable decisions in Moldova, have meetings next week with the team on the ground. We're traveling to Moldova next week. We will decide whether, in parallel to the actions taken in Moldova, if we initiate actions to obtain interim measure decisions or decisions on the pre-trial detention status of Evghenia at the moment.
I mean, the question of timing is not dependent on us; is dependent on the mainly on the judicial system in Moldova. But a defense of this type doesn't imply just one action. As a matter of fact, we have a full scope of actions that we will be implementing in the next following weeks. As a matter of fact, William and myself, our both teams, just joined this defense a month ago, and we are seeing every possible venues. But this has a judicial frame, this has an international frame, and this also has an awareness frame, because one of the things that the Moldovan system must understand is that you cannot pretend to be a European and a member of the European Union and behaving yourself or your system in the way that they are behaving. This got a cost, of course.
That is actually a great point you raise about the fact that it's not up to you, it's up to the courts, whether we're talking about Moldova. The entire process itself really dictates how long this process will last. You mentioned earlier that there are no uncomfortable questions, just uncomfortable answers. I want to know, you mentioned just before the end of your speech, Mr. Gonzalo, that the conditions in which Evghenia is currently in are those that are challenging, difficult. Do you mind if you can just give a little bit more detail about the conditions that she's currently in?
Well, I mean, we haven't been able to visit her until now. We are pending of receiving that. All the information we have is from our colleagues there, but we have sufficient experience to understand about the difference of conditions between European standards and the standard that she's living.
Okay.
What we did hear from the lawyers in Moldova, the colleagues who visit her, and I think often, what we heard is that she only was able to have one visit from her family, only once. That the prison conditions are extremely difficult, and that she is having an extremely difficult time morally, but also physically. So that it is very, very harsh. One can imagine that she's getting a especially strict regime of detention there, and that a lot of pressure is being put on her. So these are very, very difficult and challenging times, obviously, for her. As Gonzalo said, we're waiting and hoping that we will get our registration finalized to be able to visit her. I must relay this call to all parties involved in this process to make sure that we will be able to visit her. I've Gonzalo also visited clients all around the world and it does not need to take weeks and weeks and weeks to get an authorization as EU lawyers or non-EU lawyers actually. But for example, was asked to me and to Gonzalo, who has been, I think, more effective than me, to share not only our registration cards, which is perfectly normal, but also my university diplomas. So I'm still very young, but I must say that that goes back quite a long time ago. I did study at La Sorbonne, but I do not have my diplomas going back 30 years ago. Maybe I'm not egocentric enough, but I don't have these documents anymore. And I said, but why on earth do you need this? It's just so exotic. And so the Moldovan colleague said, yes, I know, but I mean that was something that was asked as a requirement for you to be able to get a green light to visit your clients. So I said, listen guys, I mean, I'm not giving this, and I'm not going to wait for weeks to ask the Sorbonne to, if they have still that somewhere in their drawers. This is just ridiculous. So I understand that there might be kind of signs that people are trying to make the process lengthy and to make sure that we won't be able to visit, as well as we hope and we believe that the central government will be intelligent enough to make us stay comfortable, not uncomfortable.
I mean,
doing anything else would really be stupid on their side, and I do believe that they're intelligent enough not to enter these kind of wrong moves regarding us coming over.
to be honest, with this card, I enter in all the prisons in Europe and around the world without problem. But that happened also to me. I didn't have my diploma from the university, and they were asking me to get it in August in Spain. In August in Spain, except holidays, nobody can issue that. Finally, I got it. For the first time in a quarter of a century, I have my diploma, okay? But at the end of the day, why are all these restrictions? Because she's not there, but because of what she has done. She's in prison and in these conditions because what she represented. And sorry, because you have been asking quite a long time to make a question.
Yes, my name is John Loughlin. I'm a lecturer in politics in a small private university in the west of France, en Vendée.
Well,
I have written during my academic career fairly extensively on the abuses committed by international criminal tribunals. So I listened to your presentation of the case with great interest, and it reminded me of many similar cases that I've observed, for example, in the Yugoslav Tribunal or in the International Criminal Court. I'd like to make a comment and then ask a specific question. Maître Boye, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
No problem.
You said repeatedly that Moldova should not expect to join the European Union on the basis that this trial disqualifies the voters in Gagauzie and commits violations of the rule of law. But you know perfectly well that the European Union itself, the European Union countries themselves, have repeatedly deployed lawfare, as the Americans call it, against politicians. The most obvious example is in this country, Marine Le Pen. It's not a criminal procedure, at least the decision to declare her ineligible is not a criminal procedure, but it has the same effect as the one that you described accurately, Evghenia Gutul. In Germany, the largest country in the European Union, there are constant threats to ban the largest opposition party. The party is under investigation by the Bundesverfassungsschutz, the constitutional body which protects the constitution under the control of the Interior Ministry. And the most flagrant example of all, of course, is the disqualification of the presidential candidate in the presidential elections in neighboring Romania, Călin Georgescu. Again, it's not a criminal procedure, but it has the same effect. If we go further outside the European Union, in Republika Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the president of Republika Srpska has also been disqualified by a court under the more or less under the control of the European Union appointed High Representative. So there's no contradiction at all between these abuses in Moldova and European Union practice. On the contrary, European Union practice is a precedent for what has now happened to Evghenia Gutul. My question is this, addressed to Maître Julié. You described these two cases that the same judge sat on, and you have speculated that the organized criminal group in Evghenia Gutul's case is Ilan Shor and his party. But you've said quite clearly that that is not stated in the ruling, so we have to guess. Have you, this is a factual question, looked at the other ruling, which, as I understand from you, concluded that it was a criminal organization? Have you looked at it? And if you have, what is your assessment of it?
I haven't been able to look at it. I'm not sure whether this decision is public or not. I'll ask. Okay. It will be interesting to indeed access the document if this is possible, but I don't think, it will change much, because for me, we know what we're going to find in it, and it's very clear what the construction of Evghenia Gutul's sentence is made of. Just to comment on your comment, which is that I've got a clear idea, and legally speaking, on Marine Le Pen's sentencing, and I was interviewed a couple of times on this question, and what you say is only partially true, because the decision is a criminal sentence, and there's an additional sentence in peine complémentaire, which is peine d'inéligibilité, and that obviously has huge consequences on the political scene. So what you say is obviously true, and this is true everywhere in the world. It's this challenging but so interesting question of where is the line between politics and judicial matters, and are there overlaps? And obviously they are, and that's perfectly fine to start looking into this. I think two important comments on your comment is where we're dealing here with something very specific. Is that Evghenia Gutul is, first of all, governor, still in place. She hasn't been removed from being governor, and there's a procedure. It hasn't been done. Number two, her election has never been challenged as being non-compliant with electoral rules in Moldova. So, as well, we're discussing about Ilan Shor, and if we want to do that, I'm not Ilan Shor's lawyer, so he's sorting himself out as he wants. And I'm not so much interested about him, but our client is governor, and she does not enjoy immunity. We obviously asked this question to a constitutional specialist in Moldova, and she doesn't. So she could be prosecuted, which is what they did. But then what Gonzalo explained is obviously true, which is that she's been neutralized as governor in place, still holding the seat, without her election ever being considered as challengeable. So this is where we are. And then I would say that, our main line is leave politics aside. We're lawyers. Do we have or not grounds to challenge the legality of what is going on? The answer is yes. And if the answer is yes, there needs to be consequences, judicially, local-wise, international-wise, to what has happened, and we need to change what is going to happen. Then everyone picks what he wants, saying, oh, that's attack from abroad against the EU, or that is attack from EU against democracy, which is a growing topic. And obviously some people will say, oh my God, how can you say that? EU would never attack democracy. EU is democracy. And then people like you would say, ah, ha, ha, that is a joke. Look at what's happening here. Look at what's happening here. And just to conclude, I mean, we do a lot of sanction work at the office, not only Russian sanction work, there are sanction regimes all over the world. Venezuela, Iran, Syria. Sanction law is as challenging and fascinating as what we're discussing now. And there is a court where sanction rule of law is discussed, which is the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. The standards are quite high. We have good discussions there. And sanctions are allowed once in a while concerning legal entities from Belarus and all around the world, and Russian ones, and oligarchs sometimes are not listed anymore because it is considered that their listing is disproportionate or is a mistake, and the council is defeated in court. And all that is just super. That's good when it works like that. And this is just what we want for Evghenia. Nothing more, nothing less.
But it surprised me that you didn't mention the most similar case to Evghenia. The Catalan case. That's the most similar.
He can say a word about that.
More than the cases that you have been quoting, because the pattern are exactly the same. Two, not one, two presidents of Catalonia has been removed by the central authorities and the courts. And the actions of the Spanish judicial has been defeated all over Europe with a strong legal work based on several clear concepts. And these cases are extremely, these cases, the Catalan case and the Evghenia's case are extremely similar, even more similar than what you have mentioned. And at the end of the day, the European Court of Justice has given us right. The European Court of Human Rights is pending to resolve several cases that are in the final stage related to the Catalan cases, which will be case law, most probably directly applicable to the case of Evghenia. And no EU country has surrounded any of the Catalan leaders that went into exile in those countries. Nor Germany, nor Belgium, not even Scotland before the Brexit, not even Italy, no France. Nobody has surrounded. Why? Because what we have done in that work, in that case, is exactly what we're doing here. Just staying by the rule of law. One thing is the politics of the European Union, and the other thing are the values of the European Union, which is totally different. And I have the impression sometimes when I read the press that they don't represent us as citizens, and they also don't represent the legal system.
Just one addition. Sorry, just one.
You lose some, so you're winning if you're supporting the Catalans. You seem to have won on that.
Yeah.
But on Georgescu, the European Court of Human Rights declared the appeal inadmissible on the basis that there's no requirement, according to the convention, according to the court, for a presidential election in Romania to be free and fair.
Did that say the resolution exactly that?
Yes, because I've forgotten what the article is, but it refers to the election of the legislature as being a key element of democracy. But the president of Romania is not a member of the legislature.
Yeah, so it was more on a technical.
It's on a completely technical thing, but I'm saying they lost. I mean, he was,
yeah, okay, but we're not saying. I mean, there's no kind of no case is for sure going to be won, but maybe just in addition to what Gonzalo said, which I had in mind, but I forgot to finish on that. What is specific about Evghenia Gutul case is that it is connected with this very special situation, and Gonzalo is right. There's something similar to the Catalan case, which is that Gagauzie has a very special constitutional status, and there are rights in the constitution protecting the autonomy of the people, with rights to maintain the teaching of their language in school, with obligations of the central government to fund various parts of the region, etc. And this is something I wanted to underline very, very, very clearly, is that we are also going to call anyone to look into criminal complaints that have been filed by various people from Gagauzie, not only politicians, against central government and against individuals. The president holds immunity, so she should be okay until she's in office. But there are violations under Moldovan criminal law which relate to discrimination, to violation of the constitution. There are a series of violations that we consider are criminal wrongdoings from whoever committed them. And I understand from one of the constitutional lawyers we spoke to yesterday that a thread of complaints had been filed at various levels in Moldova, targeting the president, but not only other people, I guess civil servants, anyone involved. What happened with these? We need answers. So prosecutors prosecute. The question is, how is the choice made? So if you've got a central, and we don't have time to get into that, but there are lots of moves from the central government to neutralize any actions. There was a general prosecutor in Gagauzie who was appointed this way. That has disappeared, and now it's another one. The court, which was reviewing all questions in relation to elections, etc., in Gagauzie, has now been also taken out, and it's another more southern court which now is going to deal with it. So we've got all these moves that you have in all states, even I'm told sometimes in our country, where appointments of the highest prosecutors of the country are with the decision of the president of the French Republic. So I mean, there's also always discussions, even if in European countries, about, you know, who is number one prosecutor in the country. So obviously all that is moving, but to get down to a more kind of everyday working level of people like us, I understand that complaints have been filed. I see reasons for these complaints to be looked into, and I see that nothing is being done. We want answers on that too.
So, sorry, but the questions from this, from.
Let me, can I ask a question? Yeah.
With the.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
On or off?
On or off?
On.
Well,
It's on.
I'll try to be short. You know, my name is Dmitry Babic. I'm resident of Conférence, probably daily. It's a daily newspaper in Russia. We know that Evghenia Gutul is under sanctions by the European Union simply on the accusation of her connection to Russia, and that she was a separatist in the interest of Russia. So you partially answered my question. Gonzalo partially answered it, saying that these are two different things: the values of the EU and the politics of the EU. But aren't you afraid that the case will be politicized precisely because on the 28th of September there will be elections in Moldova, and the Catalonian case, you know, Arturo Mas, the former leader of Catalonia, came to Russia before the referendum and tried to gain sympathy from the Russian leadership, and Russia did not give its support. So somehow Catalonians, you know, the Catalonian leaders were immune to mention. They were reported by the European Court. But if Arturo Mas got the sympathy of Russia, I'm afraid the situation would be very difficult, different. So don't you think that this would be you're fighting for a very good precedent, not to criminalize any connection to Russia? Because right now it looks like any kind of connection to Russia is a reason enough for a certain leader to be declared a criminal and to end up in freedom. This is the case of Evghenia Gutul. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood completely your question, because it's difficult to hear you. But you mentioned that Evghenia Gutul is also sanctioned by the EU, which is correct. no challenges have been brought anyways till now against this status. Maybe we will be instructed to look into this, and we know how to do that, and we will carry out the needed assessment in due course. But you are right that she's sanctioned vis-à-vis what has been considered by the council. That's why I'm mentioning litigation, because the sanction against her has not been challenged before the European Court, and we know by experience on many other cases, the Council of Europe vis-à-vis European sanctions is a very powerful body, because these people have this would not be possible in France with what we have, the principle of separation of powers, but they are the people who make the law, meaning explaining what are the criteria to be sanctioned. So, for example, it's your leading business person supporting, or you're benefiting from or helping the government, not only Russia, I said there's lots of sanction regimes. So anyway, they say what the law is, and then they also decide who is going to be sanctioned. So they make the law, and they enforce the law. So it's a bit like if parliament and government were reunited in the same hands, which obviously is an extremely powerful body. And then when you're targeted, you can only hire a lawyer, needs to be an EU lawyer, and you go to court and you tell the Court of Justice, oh, look, that's not fair because I have not been doing what you're telling me, or I have been doing it, but I consider that that's not a proportionate, acceptable reason to be sanctioned. So all this is open. And my answer is a technical one, which is obviously the connection with Russia. But as I said, it's not only with Russia. It could be, in the Syrian sanction regime, but with Russia is one of the elements that bring a risk for an entity or an individual to end up having problems. They can be sanction-wise, or they can be criminal-wise, depending on local criminal provisions. But it is true that this comes with a risk, and that in some areas of Europe, at the border of Eastern Europe especially, but not only, it could be elsewhere, that there are discussions where cultures, people claim to be pro-Russian, which is the case of Gagauzie. If I understand properly, there were referendums carried out which do not have a legal consequence, because I understand that the only referendums that could have legal consequences are the ones carried out at a national level. But they have maybe a cultural importance, which is that apparently a very, very strong majority of people in this region, and I'm not saying it's good or bad. I mean, people say what they want, hopefully, but that by more than 95%, I think people of this province say they do not want to join the EU. And it's not for me to say if that is good or not good. People decide for themselves. And I think democracy and the rule of law in the EU is about respecting people's choice. So this is where this case is complicated, because we're dealing with a province which has an autonomous status within a state which is sovereign also. But there's this sensitive, it's extremely sensitive, because there's also collides cultural, social, and political topics which are not going in the same direction. And this is, I think, also why all this is unfolding as it is, because a lot of other considerations are coming into play, and we believe they should not.
But going more in details into your question, if you allow me, I'm in agreement with you about the parallels between the Catalan case and the case of Evghenia. Why? because in both cases they have thrown the allegation of the implication of Russia. Don't forget that in the Catalan case, a judge has said that there was a plan to send 10,000 Russian soldiers to Catalonia. And that judge was not inhabilitated. Just for saying that, somebody should be inhabilitated. And they said that there was a Russian network, an implication of Russia into the independent movement in Catalonia. Everything was not only false, it was the creation of two journalists, one judge, and one businessman. That was what they have created by order of who knows whom. And here we have the same. They're saying that behind Evghenia are the Russians. It's always the same pattern, because at the end we're in a crystal clear lawfare case. I don't know if that answered your question. Any more questions? Sorry. Was it what you were asking?
Okay, I'm quite happy with your answer. I remember the story about 10,000 soldiers who needed for comic powers.
Well, I'm still thinking, why are you going to put 10,000 Russian soldiers in Catalonia?
And how are they going to land? They're going to
across the whole NATO countries. I mean, at a given point, when it's come to criminalize politicians, the imagination has no boundaries.
But you know, the election is approaching. Do you expect pressure on your clients to increase because of it?
And just one thing on that, on pressure on the client, it's just coming back to my mind, because I mean, we've been trying to digest so much information in a very short time frame, but I was told, and I don't have any reasons to believe that is not true, even if I haven't seen for the moment any material supporting evidence, but that it was clearly told to Evghenia Gutul that if she would resign from being a governor, then that the prosecutions would probably be dropped. And she refused, and then happened what happened. And we did do a bit of homework in looking into previous attacks on Bashkans, and I understand that there were several investigations carried out, but that this is the first time that things have gone so far. And I do think that this maybe corresponds to a paroxystic situation, politically, geopolitically speaking today, which confirms your analysis, which is that anything at the moment which is connected with Russia for good or bad reasons by any of the players in stake might be using situations as to serve their agenda, and this is why I think we need to remain extremely cautious. And our life jacket here is the one of staying lawyers, technical and experts about what is respectful of the rule of law and what is not. I sometimes share this view with people who are maybe a bit more pessimistic than me and say, rule of law, ha ha ha, what? I mean, the rule of law is dead. What are you talking about? So I mean, obviously it's not an easy ride, but the rule of law is not dead. Otherwise we would not be here speaking. We believe that it's always worth being defended, and we actually are once in a while successful in doing so. And even if we're not successful on the ground, listen, I mean, we're trying to bring the standards up, and I do believe that if we were not doing it, hopes on the ground would be lower. So we'll see where we get, and we are here in a situation. I mean, we help try to help people all around the world. We really only do international work. And in many countries of the world, I mean, you don't have leverage because, I mean, if you're, you know, I'm not going to name any countries. I don't want to be to offend anyone, but here we have leverage. Why? Because we have the president and we have the central government, which is claiming, as Gonzalo said it very clearly, that they want to meet the standards of the EU. You cannot say that and not be yourself respecting these principles in the course of the case that we are discussing now. So you need to choose, and our job is to expose the double speech here, and I have hope that they changes will come, because if they don't, they will be exposed, and they don't want that.
And let me finish with one thing. By keeping Evghenia in prison, they're not only pressure her, they are pressure her voters and her followers. And that is an alteration of the possible result of any election. To have a free and fair election, you have to have free candidates, not imprisoned candidates.
That's very right. About Ivan Short, just one question. Where is the border between someone being an oligarch or just
Sorry,
a
can you
wealthy
repeat the question, please? Because I didn't
Yeah,
hear you.
I understand. I will try to about Ivan Short, you know, the sponsor of Gutul campaign, you know, or the person who was accused of being a sponsor. Where is the border? Where is the difference between being an oligarch and being just a wealthy person who gives donations or charity or whatever? I mean, what we face now in Europe is that many Russians are dispossessed of their property, being called oligarchs. And who decides, you know, if I have $50,000, am I an oligarch or am I just a wealthy person who made a fortune?
Well, to be honest, the concept of oligarch, for me, it's the criminalization of the richness. Maybe we have oligarchs like Elon Musk, if I'm allowed to say it, because at the end of the day, that's applicable to anybody. Anybody who has a lot of money in relations to the powerful, the political power could be an oligarch. Well, let's use it in all the countries. I have a full list of oligarchs in the Western countries.
Yeah, I think another thing is that sanctions are political tools. Sanctions in the EU are part of la politique extérieure de sécurité commune de l'Europe. They're political tools. And so then we do get some judicial review. Hopefully we do, because it seems that sometimes the court, and actually not only sometimes, but a couple of times every month, or not far from, decides that the line that the council went too far, that the criteria do not meet the fundamental principles of the European treaties, etc. So it's about the law, but it's also, when it is in the council's hands, it is about politics. And then the court steps in sometimes and says, no, that doesn't meet the EU requirements. So the system does work, but it is true that at the beginning, the council, which is the council, is composed of representatives of foreign affairs of EU member states. So it's a political group. It's and so they do politics. That's how it is. So about oligarchs, to answer your question, yes. I mean, then some regulations made by the council say, okay, it's not about only being an oligarch, it's about being a successful businessman in a sector providing for Russia substantial sources of revenue for the Russian government. That's one of the criteria. There are others. And some meet the requirements, some don't. Some people are targeted under a criterion, but say that the council got it wrong. They call that error of assessment, and you can win a case because they got the wrong guy. Sometimes they got the wrong idea, or sometimes the criterion in itself is considered to be illegal because it's too broad or it's not proportionate enough. So that's why judicial review is a good thing.
Okay. If there is no more questions. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It's gonna